It's a little further past 10. I want to call this meeting to order for the CRRMA board meeting. It's Monday, May 17th. Mr. Berman, are there any public comments?
No public comment.
No public comments. You've all had an opportunity to review the minutes of the previous meeting on April 15th. Is there a motion to approve same?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
You sound good in that microphone.
Yes, it is.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Item number 4, discussion and possible action on the following aspects of Loop 375 at I-10, the America's Interchange Project. Item A, City of El Paso's Transportation Reinvestment Zones. Mr. Tejas.
Raymond Tejas, Executive Director. Item 4 is really intended to provide a complete update on the Americas Interchange Project. I'll go through each of the sections one by one. Of course, feel free to stop me if any questions arise. Item 4A deals with the City of El Paso's Transportation Reinvestment Zone. By way of history, if you'll recall, the City of El Paso created TRZ, Transportation Reinvestment Zone number 1, in calendar year 2008. The city later determined that there were some issues with that Transportation Reinvestment Zone and has gone back and is in the process of creating 2 Transportation Reinvestment Zones, number 2 and number 3. In your packet, I've provided the latest copy of the maps for Transportation Reinvestment Zones number 2 and number 3. The item for their introduction as an ordinance is actually on tomorrow's City Council meeting, and if everything goes well, both TRZs will actually be adopted on May 25th, next Tuesday. So everything's running smoothly on that. I haven't heard of any issues from the city, so hopefully we'll have both of those transportation reinvestment zones adopted next Tuesday, the 25th. Item number 4B, and
Excuse me, before you go on, Raymond.
yes, sir.
Based on those zones, this should have no impact with our agreements with TxDOT or anything else?
In the end, it will not. Now, we've got to take a couple of additional steps. For example, the assignment, restatement and assignment agreement that the City of El Paso entered into with the CRRMA has to be reworked. And in fact, I've received a draft of that late Friday, so we're close to finalizing that. So I will be back before you all with the revised agreement. However, in the end, we will be in the same place we were before.
Okay.
Mr. Tejas?
Yes, sir.
There was originally some forecast on some potential revenue that the TRZ would generate. That was off the original TRZ, is that correct?
That's correct.
So is there going to be some sort of analysis to determine if that's impacted based on the new parcels that are put forth today?
There has been some of that work done by the City of El Paso. However, it won't be done to the level that we did it the last go round. The reason why we went to that length for TRZ number 1 was that it was necessary because the City of El Paso was not guaranteeing the TRZ. So as a reminder, we're taking out a state infrastructure bank loan and repaying that loan with the TRZ increment. So because there was no guarantee on that TRZ increment, we needed that projection study to give as confidence to the state infrastructure bank that the loan would actually be repaid. So now, when the revised deal, the City of El Paso is actually guaranteeing the repayments to the state infrastructure bank. So because of that guarantee, the projection study is no longer necessary. Now, having said that, the City of El Paso is doing their own projections because they're using those projections to identify the exact parameters of the zones.
I'm assuming the guarantee is going to come from the revenue that's generated out of the TRZ.
Well, actually, it's the guarantee comes from the city's general fund. So if the zone, for example, just for round numbers, if the SIB loan repayment amount is $1 million and the TRZ only generated $500,000, the other $500,000 comes out of the city's general fund. Now, in essence, what you're really talking about is kind of the same pot because the TRZ pulls revenue, tax revenue as well. So it's all kind of coming from the same area, but it's guaranteed, and that's the important part for us.
Raymond, at one time there was an issue with the TERS being contiguous. Has that already been resolved?
Yes, sir. And in fact, that was the reason why the city went back. And in fact, I believe on tomorrow's agenda they're also introducing an ordinance to dissolve TRZ number 1. That was the main reason why. So they'll dissolve number 1 and adopt numbers 2 and 3 at the same time.
Right, because the TERS calls for it to be continuous. You can't have any breaks in the zone, right?
That's correct, and that's why now you see 2 TRZs. And just so you know also, TRZ number 3 will cover the Northeast Main Lanes project. TRZ number 2 will cover the Americas and the Zaragoza projects. So all of those issues have been resolved, and the city is comfortable with the new maps. Okay, so items 4B and 4C deal with the pass-through toll agreement with TxDOT and the State Infrastructure Bank loan. Both of those items are still in TxDOT's hands. They're putting together the drafts. Both of those will be required before we can move on to the next step. But unfortunately, I don't have any new news for you on that front. Actually, last week I was working with TxDOT, and they had, I think, what were the final questions for the passes, so we should have a draft of that here pretty soon. The Comprehensive Development Agreement, that's the agreement between the RMA and the design builder, the selected design builder, which in our case is the Americas Gateway Builders. We had our second negotiation session with them last week, and it's going well. Everything is moving forward. And the beauty of the process that we're utilizing is that the majority of the agreement is set out within the procurement process. So there's not a whole lot of negotiation. At this point, we're just making sure that everything that was proposed in there, that was in their proposal, is included within our agreement. So we're going through that now. We anticipate having a completed comprehensive development agreement by May 27th. So we're moving quickly on that, and things are going well. The selection of a trustee, I met with, in anticipation of the coming Americas closing, I met with our financial advisors, which is First Southwest, and we went through kind of a checklist of what needs to happen next. One of the things that we'll need to do is select a trustee. So what I'll ask of you today, and really the only action item within item number 4, is for me to request a motion from you all to authorize me to begin the procurement process for a trustee. As you'll recall, we actually have a trustee for the State Spur 601 project, and those are the individuals that deal with all of the bond proceeds and deal with the payments. So we will need one of those as well.
Is that currently Wells Fargo?
Yes, sir.
Raymond, if I may, can you define the scope and definition of the trustee?
Well, and we will be doing that through the procurement process, but in essence, the trustee will be in charge, and we're trying to define exactly what they will be handling, but at this point, they will be handling all of the bond proceeds for sure. The question will be, how do we want to deal with the stimulus funds and the other federal funds, which are the Coordinated Border Infrastructure Funds, and then also the TRZ funds through the SIB.
Will this come back before approval, or was just?
Yes, absolutely. All that you're doing is authorizing me to begin the process, put something out on the street so that I can bring it back to you all for action.
You need a motion to that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? None. All those in favor of item 4E, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you. The last item then is really just kind of summary of all of these other items. In essence, what has to happen next is that the TRZ has to be adopted, which will happen on May 25th. Once the TRZ is adopted, then we will be authorized to sign the pass-through toll agreement and the State Infrastructure Bank agreement. As you may recall, the board, the RMA board, has already authorized the executive director to sign both the pass-through and the State Infrastructure Bank loan agreements. In addition, the Texas Transportation Commission has already authorized TxDOT's executive director to sign both documents as well. So once the TRZ gets put in place, and in fact I should mention the minute order that authorized the TxDOT executive director to sign the agreements explicitly noted that the TRZ has to be in place first. So once that gets put into place, we'll be able to sign both documents, we'll be able to move forward. Once those documents are then signed, then we provide all of the complete documents, what's referred to generally as a transcript. We provide the transcript over to the Attorney General. The Attorney General's office has to review this process because it's a comprehensive development agreement. Once they review and approve, and we have assurances that will move smoothly because the Alamo RMA did this fairly recently, and we're using essentially the same types of documents. So that should move smoothly. Once they give approval, then the remaining review and approval comes from TxDOT through their Texas Turnpike Authority, TTA, and also through the Federal Highway Administration. Once they review and concur, which should be fairly smooth as well, because we were quick to bring them into the process. They've been involved in every step. In fact, they were in our first and second negotiation meetings for the CDA, so that review and concurrence should come very quickly as well. Once we receive that concurrence, then we'll actually be authorized to sign the agreement. So all of these things are kind of coming to a head now. They're starting to dovetail into each other. Things are moving. Subject to your questions, that's really all I have on the Americas project.
Any questions? None. Let's move to item number 5, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute work authorization number 5 with PBS&J regarding general engineering services to be provided from the date of execution of the comprehensive development agreement with the design builder of the Americas Interchange through the completion of the project. Mr. Tejas?
Okay. As you know, we have a general engineering consultant. The lead is PBS&J. We also have subs of Jacob and ECM and some other local folks as well. What to date, and another by way of history, actually, we have one main agreement with our general engineering consultant, and from there, then when we actually have a scope for an individual project, we go back to the general engineering consultant and develop what's referred to as a work authorization. This is really more for the benefit of the public so that they're up to speed on what we're doing. We have work authorization number 1 with the GEC, which actually provided the funding and established the scope for the development of the planning steps for the Americas project, the Zaragoza project, and also the Northeast Main Lanes project. So we did the initial step of Americas through work authorization number 1, and that really took us through the obligation of federal funds. We then entered into work authorization number 4 with the general engineering consultant, which really developed the scope and identified the funds for that work that was to be completed between the obligation of federal funds, which was January 13th, and the execution of a comprehensive development agreement. So that was the second work authorization. That's the one we're working with now. So what we need now is a work authorization number 5 with the general engineering consultant, which will actually get them, which has developed the scope, identifies the funding, and allows them to commence work on the Americas project from the execution of the comprehensive development agreement all the way through the completion of the project. So that's what you see before you, and that's included in your backup. What we're looking at here is roughly $7.75 million. I should mention, too, the scope was developed originally by the general engineering consultant, and then we had them sit down with TxDOT. And that was important because TxDOT is actually has retained certain responsibilities within the development of the Americas project. And what we wanted to do was make sure that our general engineering consultant wasn't doing something that TxDOT was already responsible for doing. So we covered that duplication of efforts. In fact, there was one section that was removed after that review, so that I think was a good exercise. So that's what item number 5 is. And this actually, I'll ask for your authorization to sign it. We will sign it, put it into place, but it won't actually commence. They won't commence work on this until the comprehensive development agreement is actually executed. But there will be a seamless transition. We'll be able to move very quickly.
Labor rates, cost, all these have already been negotiated out, then it's understood as per the agreement, correct?
That's exactly right. That was set when we signed the main agreement with the GEC. So really all this does is set scope and hours.
Any other questions? Not, is there an item to approve item number 5?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? None, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 6, discussion and action on a board resolution relative to the Cesar Chavez project.
You did that quite well.
I've been working on it, Ralph.
This one, unfortunately, I'm going to ask for a deletion. As you know, the RMA is involved in the market valuation process with TxDOT. And what that amounts to really is establishing the business terms and conditions for the project, which amount to 3 things. It's the scope of the project, the initial toll rate and the escalation method. Now, the reason for that process is, and in fact, what we have to do is go through the process in order to execute what's referred to as a market valuation agreement. Once you execute that agreement, then that triggers a 6-month period within which the RMA will evaluate the project to determine whether or not this board would like to pursue the project. We had gone through the initial negotiation with TxDOT, and they've raised another issue after that session. So we're going to have to sit down again with them and see if we can't resolve that, and I'll bring that to you as soon as I can. So unfortunately, I'm asking for a deletion of this item.
Do we need a motion to delete, or?
Yes, sir. I'd ask for that.
So moved.
Second.
All right. If no further discussion, all those in favor of deleting item number 6, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 7, discussion and action on a board resolution ratifying the submittal of a request for financial assistance to the Texas Department of Transportation regarding the proposed funding and development of the Cesar Chavez project and authorizing the submittal of any related documentation as necessary.
Okay.
Mr. Tejas.
The Cesar Chavez project, as you all know, there is funding identified for this project in the amount of $80.25 million. 75 million of it comes from Proposition 14 funds, and 6.25 comes from a federal earmark for the project. What this item is the first step in a request for the RMA to actually have access to the funds. Now, as I just mentioned in the item prior, the RMA has not determined whether or not it will actually pursue the project. However, this application, what it does is request access to the funds so that we can begin identifying whether or not the project will be pursued. So the application, and I should mention too, this application has already been submitted. It's a 2-step process. There's an initial submission, and it goes to the Texas Transportation Commission for an initial reading. And that initial reading then, through a minute order, the staff of TxDOT is authorized to negotiate the final agreement, and then that final agreement comes a second time back to the Texas Transportation Commission. So let me back up one step further. I should have mentioned this at the outset. There's a resolution that was executed in 2007 by the RMA board, which authorized the chair to submit these types of applications, subject to the chair bringing the application to the board at the meeting immediately after the submission. And the intent of it really at the time was that all of these things are very time sensitive, and since you have to go back to the TTC twice, that's at least a 2-month period. So it's really an attempt to expedite the process. So the chair has signed, and I should mention too that this application has been reviewed by our consultants as well as our attorneys. The application was submitted, and now we're back to you to brief you on what was submitted and ask for a ratification of the action, and also to authorize the staff to take those actions necessary to take it to the next step. Now, the submission does not commit the board or the entity to anything. It's really just an initial request. So we have not committed to anything just yet.
Why is a ratification necessary? I mean, why wasn't the previous motion just simply a continuation?
Well, because the previous motion was a resolution that said the chair can sign and submit subject to coming back and having the action ratified. The intent of the board at that time in 2007 was not that the chair be authorized to go out and submit applications at his or her whim, but rather submit it, but bring it back to the board and apprise them of what was submitted. So that's why we're back.
How long do these proposals take to kind of work their way through the system for our request to be submitted before actual funds potentially would come in?
Well, it depends, really. It really depends. I can't really answer that. And a good example of why I can't is the pass-through toll and the SIB loans. Those were approved. One of them was approved by the TTC in December of last year, and the other, I think, in January of this year. So you don't know how long it's going to take. It depends on the complexity of the project, ultimately. I mean, this one, we're assuming would move very, very swiftly because the funds have been identified. Everything is in place, whereas with Americas, there have been moving parts up until, and in fact, are still moving. The TRZ isn't even in place yet. So that accounts for some of the delay on the Americas.
Is it just one submittal for both funds that total the 80 million approximately?
Yes. And this application, I don't know what level of detail you'd like to go into, but the application really goes into an overview of the project and breaks down the proposed funding sources. And this would be a grant. We're not borrowing funds for this. And in fact, I did not include all of the exhibits, but I can certainly provide those to you. They're fairly lengthy exhibits, somewhat technical, but I can provide those to you. I did provide a list of the exhibits in case you're interested in seeing any individual ones, or I can run hard copies for you as well if you're interested. So it really talks about what the agency's intent is. That's the point of the application. What is our intent with regard to the use of the funds?
Any other questions, comments? Is there a motion to approve item number 7?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? None. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 8, discussion and action on a board resolution adopting a policy regarding the process for the allocation of the salary costs to CRRMA projects. Mr. Tejas.
This item, I'd actually request, unfortunately, for a postponement until the next meeting. Let me give you some history on this. When we went through our last audit, one of the items that the auditors found was that, actually, let me explain a little bit. The RMA allocates certain percentages of my salary to the individual projects. For example, the Americas project is paying 75% of my salary because it's taking up 75% of my time. Now that will float, and certainly once we get the CDA in place and get everything really locked down, that will decrease. What the CPA has recommended is that we go through and adopt a formal policy on how that percentage is arrived at. Now that's done already, but I unfortunately didn't have the time to get that policy put together in time for the CPA or the auditors to review that and approve that before I brought it to you all. So that's the reason I'm asking for a postponement. Ultimately, this is already done. It's just a matter of putting it into a formal policy and having it adopted by the board. And that really ultimately helps with future audits, and that's really the point of this policy.
Okay, but you plan to bring that back at the next meeting, so
Yes, sir.
we need to postpone this.
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion to postpone?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 9, discussion and action on the executive director's report.
Got 5 minutes there, buddy.
That's too much. We have 2 items, actually. I wanted to talk about the public outreach efforts. As you probably have noticed by now, we are now moving quickly to get the RMA's name out there. We want to explain to the public who we are, what we're doing, and how we're doing it. We have with us today Suzanne Michaels, who is our lead for our PR efforts. I wanted to mention a couple of things that we've been doing to get the name out there. We've developed a brochure which I passed out at the last meeting for you all, and that dealt with the RMA in general. We're also developing 3 additional brochures that will each one will deal with a different project. So we'll be able to provide those to you all, and whenever we're out in the public, we'll be handing those out.
Are we putting all those on the website as well?
Yes, sir. I haven't put the first one yet, but we will. Absolutely. And to that point, I've really been meaning to develop the project site, the project webpage on our site. That needs to happen. So I'll be working on that over this week.
Who's doing that work for you?
The city of El Paso actually provides, as an in-kind service, all of the web work. Yeah, we're in good hands. Really, I developed the template, and they put it into shape for us. So it's been working really well so far. We're doing presentations. Suzanne has done one as recently as I think last week. I've done a couple. I'm doing one tonight for the community scholars. So we're trying to get out there, and if you all are involved in any organizations and would like to speak to them, or would like for me or someone else to speak to them, let me know, and we can add them to the list. We've been in a couple of articles in the El Paso Times. Of course, you probably know the chair was in a Q&A in the El Paso Inc. I think it was last week. Suzanne and I were on the 7 Extra program a couple of weekends back. And also the chair has done some recent radio interviews as well. So we're trying to get out there. And if you all have any ideas on where else we need to go, if we haven't hit it, or new organizations we need to visit, let us know. We'll incorporate those.
I actually have a question. Why a PR campaign and why now?
Well, I think the answer to that is ultimately that the RMA is really on the cusp of doing really large projects now, and I think it's important that we get out there and introduce ourselves to the community. It's something that we had put off for a little while, and the intent at the time, from my end, really was we didn't want to get out there so early and introduce ourselves to the public and then have a really long lag period between the introduction and then an actual project hitting the street. So we're there now. The Americas project is we've selected the best value proposer. We're really close to signing the agreement and getting out there. So I think it's the appropriate time to go out.
Raymond, I think you and Suzanne have done a great job. I mean, we've done a lot of work, or you've done a lot of work very quickly that have really done a lot to kind of let people know who the RMA is and what we're doing. And, you know, the article, the Q&A, and the ink was great. The 7 interview was terrific. So good job.
Thank you. That's actually Suzanne's job, so I thank her publicly. Thank you.
You know, one of the other things, Suzanne, I think you've talked to some of the board members, but I think it may also be significant that we have some outreach on the Spanish language, radio, TV, and as well as print media. So contrary to my marvelous pronunciation of Cesar Chavez, that's about where it ends. So,
So you're not doing those interviews?
No.
Okay.
But we do have 3 board members, I think, that are very capable of doing that, and so hopefully you'll work with Suzanne and make sure that we have that outreach as well.
I believe Tony and Susan have already volunteered, Chair.
Good.
I think it's important to keep in mind that all of this outreach ties back to being public and being transparent in what we're doing. And my biggest issue is very few people knew what the RMA even was or did, yet we're spending millions of dollars of public money, and they need to know. And so I applaud your efforts and Suzanne's as well. Thank you.
No, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. I'm always intrigued by the apathy of El Paso's constituents and how much we've been doing, because these meetings are public and we never have any public comments. Exactly. You know, we never have any attention. We never draw any. So it's not that we're doing a PR campaign. It's actually the opposite, that people have not been more interested.
And I think the design of this is to educate the people of El Paso to what we are doing, because I don't think they realize the impact we're going to have on the community, not just in mobility issues, but economic factors as well. And I'll give you an example. I'm not taking anyone from Texas, but on the inner loop, I don't think we were ever mentioned as being part of the inner loop. No. And I thought we were a critical piece of that. So I think that's what this is. And I think as people start seeing the value we bring to the table, I think the interest will arise.
I think that the only context that I've heard the RMA mentioned in is usually toll roads.
Yes, negative.
So we already have a label, and I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get rid of it very easily, especially when the first toll project, if it happens, hits the road. But anyway, you know, we'll come to that.
Well, and I think also that's a really good point. The part of our effort is to highlight these projects, because when you look at our slate of projects, the majority of them are not tolled.
Right.
And we're moving on most of those now. I mean, the Americas is not tolled. The Inner Loop Liberty Expressway is not tolled. So all of these projects, the majority of them are not tolled. So it's definitely one of the main points we're trying to get across.
Suzanne?
If I could just add this, I think that most people's lives are so complex, and they look at government as being so sophisticated that they can't take in all of the information that's being thrown to them. So I see it as incumbent upon us to do the outreach, get information out there, whether it's talking to Lions clubs, Rotary clubs, every pathway that we can to get this information out about what the RMA is, what the projects are that we're involved in, to get it out there. We're putting together brochures right now. We've got our basic brochure explaining the RMA. We're working on the America's Interchange right now. We have a plan for 4 brochures, which are tools that we can hand to people when we go talk to them about the RMA. I think that a lot of this is really personal connection with people. Anybody who's taking the time to be involved in a civic organization or a church organization. I mean, we are putting out, please call us. We want to come talk to you and just start laying the groundwork of explaining the millions of dollars that are being spent on these transportation mobility projects and why. So we've really just kind of gotten to the point where we're kicking into gear. Don Flores is part of this as outreach. I'll be calling upon all of you to please come with. The Spanish language outreach is absolutely critical. We've just hit the point where we're starting to have the tools available to hand out to people. And the more that we talk about this, the more that people become aware before the construction begins, then they already know, oh, okay, I know exactly what this is. I know how long it's going to take. I know what the benefit is. So that's how I see our role in public outreach.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Okay, so that takes us to item 9B, which is the State Spur 601 project briefing. It's been some time since we've had Abrams come by to give us a briefing, and that was by design. As you know, Abrams was one of the proposers in the Americas interchange. So we'll ask them, now that we've essentially wrapped up the Americas procurement, we'll ask them to come back and give you a full briefing. But I did want to mention a couple of things. As you know, hopefully as you know, the spur you can actually take now from end to end. Doesn't mean they're done, but and in fact they won't be done until hopefully January 2011, which is a projected substantial completion date. But you can take it from one end to another, and I hope that you do that frequently so we can get paid. But that was a good thing, and of course also it was renamed the Liberty Expressway recently as well. And in fact, that was on the day of our last meeting. I think we mentioned it.
I think we see it every time we land in El Paso. Look down. There it is.
That's right. So,
Maybe we could start getting the jets to kind of do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I did want to mention that. The other thing that I did want to mention was that we are expecting our second round of vehicle counts. That second period is from January 1 of 2010 all the way through May 31st of 2010. So starting June 1, I should receive from Abrams the vehicle counts for that period, and then we'll submit it within about a week or so for payment from TxDOT. So this will, again, is our second invoice, and I'll bring that back to you so you can see what that number is. So I just wanted to mention those two things, and again, we'll get Abrams in here to give a full briefing. But everything's running really smoothly. It's looking good out there.
Very
So,
good.
subject to your questions, that's all that I have on the agenda for you today.
Very good. That pretty much wraps it up. If there aren't any other comments, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
All those in favor, please stand. Please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We're adjourned.
Great.